BTS News Today. When a single phrase is enough to send millions of people into collective reflection, you know it carries weight far beyond its syllables. Jungkook's quiet use of the words, "my mirror," in reference to Jimin, did not arrive with fireworks or official statements. There was no press release, no carefully edited teaser, no dramatic pause engineered for headlines. It surfaced gently, almost accidentally, woven into a moment that felt personal rather than performative. And yet, within hours, ARMY across the world began asking the same question in countless languages. What did Jungkook really mean? To understand why this phrase resonated so deeply, it is necessary to look not only at the words themselves, but at the history that surrounds them. Jungkook and Jimin's relationship has always existed in a space that feels both visible and elusive. Fans have watched them grow from teenagers navigating a brutal industry into global artists carrying the expectations of millions. Over the years, their bond has been expressed through shared laughter, quiet glances, late-night conversations mentioned in passing, and moments of emotional vulnerability that slipped through the cracks of official content. None of it has ever been framed as a declaration. Instead, it has unfolded like a story told between the lines. The phrase, "my mirror," is particularly powerful because of what a mirror represents. A mirror does not flatter. It reflects. It shows you who you are when no one else is speaking, when the noise fades and the performance ends. To call someone a mirror is to say that they reveal parts of you that even you might not always want to see. It suggests honesty, familiarity, and a level of emotional intimacy that cannot be manufactured. This is why Jungkook's words struck such a nerve. They felt too specific to be casual, too poetic to be accidental. Observers quickly noticed the timing. Jungkook has been in a period where his words carry a different gravity. In recent months, his tone in lives and interviews has shifted toward introspection. He speaks more slowly, chooses his words more carefully, and often circles back to ideas of identity, growth, and self-understanding. When Jimin appears in these conversations, Jungkook's energy subtly changes. There is a softness there, a sense of being understood without explanation. Against this backdrop, "my mirror" sounded less like a metaphor chosen at random and more like a truth finally articulated. Fans began revisiting old moments with new eyes. They remembered times when Jungkook seemed to measure himself against Jimin, not competitively, but emotionally. Jimin has often been the member who voices his insecurities openly, who speaks about fear and doubt with disarming honesty. Jungkook, in contrast, has historically internalized his struggles, presenting strength and capability even when under immense pressure. Over time, many have noticed how Jungkook appears to learn emotional language by watching Jimin. In that sense, the idea of Jimin as a mirror feels almost inevitable. A mirror also implies growth. When you look into one long enough, you begin to notice change. Jungkook's journey has been marked by constant evolution, not just musically but personally. He has spoken about wanting to understand himself beyond the expectations placed upon him since adolescence. If Jimin is his mirror, then Jimin becomes part of that process of self-discovery, not as a guide issuing directions, but as a presence that reflects truth simply by existing. What makes this message even more compelling is the absence of clarification. Jungkook did not rush to explain himself. He did not contextualize the phrase for comfort or safety. In an industry where words are often carefully sanitized, this silence felt intentional. It allowed listeners to sit with the meaning rather than consume a packaged interpretation. For many fans, this was the most honest part of all. Real feelings are rarely followed by footnotes. Of course, interpretations vary. Some see "my mirror" as an artistic expression, a shorthand for creative synergy and shared experience as performers. Others read it as emotional language, pointing toward a deep personal bond that exists regardless of labels. What unites these interpretations is the recognition that Jungkook was acknowledging something essential. He was naming a connection that shapes how he sees himself. Jimin's role in this dynamic cannot be overlooked. He has long been described by those around him as deeply perceptive, someone who notices emotional shifts before words are spoken. He is often the first to reach out, the one who bridges silence with empathy. If Jungkook sees Jimin as a mirror, it may be because Jimin reflects not only who Jungkook is, but who he could be if he allows himself the same emotional honesty. The reaction from ARMY revealed just how hungry people are for authenticity. Social media filled with quiet reflections rather than loud speculation. Many fans spoke about their own mirrors in life, the people who helped them understand themselves simply by being present. In this way, Jungkook's words transcended fandom discourse and became something universal. They reminded people that self-understanding often comes through connection. There's also something deeply human about the vulnerability embedded in the phrase. To acknowledge a mirror is to admit that you do not fully know yourself alone. For someone like Jungkook, who has been framed as a prodigy and perfectionist since his teens, this admission feels especially significant. It suggests humility, trust, and a willingness to be seen without armor. That he chose to associate this idea with Jimin speaks volumes, regardless of how one chooses to define their relationship. As time passes, this moment may not be remembered for headlines or theories, but for the quiet way it shifted perception. Jungkook did not announce a revelation. He allowed one to exist. In doing so, he reminded everyone watching that meaning does not always need confirmation to be real. Sometimes, a single phrase, offered sincerely, is enough to tell a story that has been unfolding for years. My mirror now lingers in the collective consciousness of fans, not because it answers questions, but because it invites reflection. It asks listeners to consider how we see ourselves, who helps us see clearly, and what it means to acknowledge that connection out loud. Whether viewed as poetic metaphor, emotional truth, or artistic language, Jungkook's message to Jimin stands as one of those rare moments where simplicity carries extraordinary depth. And perhaps that is the real meaning after all. The phrase continued to echo because it arrived without resolution. Days passed, and Jungkook did not revisit it directly. Instead, subtle moments accumulated, each one adding quiet layers to the meaning ARMY was still trying to understand. In later appearances, Jungkook seemed more relaxed when Jimin was mentioned, even smiling in a way that felt unguarded. It was not the bright, camera-ready smile fans know so well, but something smaller, more inward, as if he were acknowledging a shared understanding that did not require explanation. This, too, felt like a reflection, one that only a mirror could offer. Language has always played an important role in how Jungkook communicates emotion. He often leans toward imagery rather than explicit statements, especially when the subject is personal. In earlier years, his words were simple, sometimes shy, as though he was still learning how to name what he felt. As he matured, his metaphors became more nuanced, more introspective. My mirror fits into this evolution perfectly. It is not a loud declaration. It is an inward-facing sentence, one that feels spoken more to himself than to an audience. Jimin, on the other hand, has long embraced emotional transparency. He speaks openly about insecurity, about fear of disappointing others, about the pressure of being seen. This openness has often created space for others to follow. Many fans believe that Jungkook's growing comfort with vulnerability did not happen in isolation, but in proximity to someone like Jimin, who treats honesty not as weakness, but as strength. Seen through this lens, the mirror metaphor becomes even more layered. A mirror does not teach you directly. It simply shows you what is already there. Jimin's presence may have allowed Jungkook to recognize parts of himself he had always carried, but never fully acknowledged. There's also the matter of timing within BTS's broader narrative. The group is in a period where reflection feels unavoidable. Years of non-stop movement, global tour, and relentless expectations have given way to moments of pause. In this space, members are looking inward, reassessing who they are as individuals as well as who they are to each other. Jungkook's words feel like part of this collective reckoning. They suggest a desire to understand not just his role on stage, but his emotional identity off it. Fans who have followed Jungkook since debut remember how often he spoke about wanting to be like his Hyungs, about learning by watching them. Over time, that admiration evolved into something more complex. With Jimin especially, the relationship shifted from guidance to mutual reflection. They are close in age, debuted young, and grew up under the same spotlight. Their struggles overlap in ways that others may not fully share. A mirror, after all, works best when it reflects something similar. The silence from official channels only deepened the sense that this moment mattered. In a culture where narratives are often quickly redirected or softened, the lack of correction felt telling. It allowed the phrase to exist in its raw form, unframed and unresolved. Fans were left not with answers, but with space, and that space invited introspection rather than consumption. As discussions continued, many noticed how Jungkook's creative output has increasingly centered on self-perception. Lyrics about identity, solitude, longing, and self-acceptance appear more frequently in his work. When placed alongside My Mirror, these themes begin to align. It becomes possible to see Jimin not just as a person in Jungkook's life, but as part of the emotional environment that shapes his artistry. Inspiration does not always come from dramatic events. Sometimes it comes from being truly seen. What makes this message endure is its refusal to be simplified. It resists labels and definitions. It exists comfortably in ambiguity, much like real human relationships do. Jungkook did not say what kind of mirror Jimin is or what exactly is reflected. That openness allows the meaning to shift depending on the listener without losing its sincerity. In the end, Jungkook, My Mirror message may be less about decoding a hidden confession and more about witnessing an artist articulate self-awareness in real time. It shows a young man recognizing that his sense of self has been shaped by connection, by shared silence as much as shared words. For those watching, it offers a reminder that the most powerful truths are often spoken quietly, and that sometimes, understanding who we are begins with recognizing who reflects us most clearly. 'Cause I'm taking the world.